I had my yearly checkup in August this year with a new doctor since my old one retired. The new doc, Dr. Wellner, is a young redhead in her 30s. I wasn't too keen on her doing the exam part, it's just a bit awkward for me. Her nurse handled all the initial stuff like checking my blood pressure, doing an ECG, and testing my memory with random objects. I always stress about that memory test, but this time I wasn't too bothered. I was freaking out about being almost butt naked in front of this hot chick, but turns out I didn't need to worry. I was so nervous that there was no way I was getting turned on. After we finished that part, she smiled and said, "Well, I bet you're relieved it's all done." "Oh yeah, definitely," I replied with a smile. The rest of the checkup was normal, blood work was great, and everything looked good. As we were about to leave, she asked, "Do you have 3 kids?" "Yep, 2 boys and a girl." "Have you adopted any?" "Kid, no eco, but why are you asking?" She blushed. "Well, I'm new and I checked out all your notes before this meeting about you." "Well, it doesn't matter. Thank you for being so quick." She waved her hands. "You must explain yourself, doctor." "This is my body." "Mr. Miller, you have a disease. You have been infertile since birth." "Mr. Miller is Ted Miller, about nobody told you about this." "No, please make copies of all my medical records now." I was as shocked as can be, certainly sorry. I should have remained silent. No, not at all, apparently too many. People didn't say anything for about 30 minutes. Then I got the notes. While I was thinking about it, I realized I'm 48, been married to Melissa for 26 years, and we have 3 kids, Brad 24, Mary 22, and William 20. Well, at least I thought we had 3 kids. Turns out Brad is married with a baby on the way, Mary just graduated from college, and William is a junior. I started wondering who their real dad was, but then I looked at them and saw they all kinda look like me. Dr. Weller's words didn't really convince me. Got the notes, took Em to my office and scanned Em. I was thinking of ways to double-check what she told me. Called up my buddy from college who's a doctor in New York. He rang me back an hour later and said, "This is Mark Madden, urologist." "What's up?" I said, "Hey Mark, I need some advice, but it's gotta be super confidential and without me showing up in person." "Sure, tell me about it," he said. I explained the situation and he told me to email him the notes so he could take a look later today. I said, "Cool, just send me the bill." He called me back at 3:30, signed off as Ted. "So, when you were born, there was a problem that made you infertile. I bet you didn't do anything about it." I had no idea about this until now. But in the past 10 years, we've come up with a way to help. Can you email me some info on this? Sure thing, I'll send it in 10 minutes. Thanks, good luck. Hey, Ted, don't you have any kids? Well, that's what I thought. Oh, I get it now. Good luck. Someone sent me a bunch of stuff on the same day they came in at 5 o'clock. I threw them in my briefcase and headed home. My youngest, William, was still at school and was supposed to graduate next week. After thinking about it, I figured it was enough to test one of the kids. When I got home, Will was chilling at home reading in the living room, while Melissa was in the kitchen cooking. She usually gets back early from her job selling houses through my older brother Robert's agency. I could smell the fish she was cooking. The 3 of us ended up eating some crispy cod and salad. Good grub, if you ask me. Mel saw my note, but probably didn't care. Mel is also 48 years old and hasn't gained a single pound since college, where we first met. She has dark brown hair and eyes like mine, and she's 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighs 130 pounds. She's pretty cute. While Mel and I were cleaning up, I grabbed the glass that Will used at dinner. Later, I took it upstairs, cleaned the rim with a Q-tip I had, then went into Will's room. I took a few hairs from his brush and swabbed the neckline of a t-shirt in his dirty clothes basket, along with his. I took a swab from inside my cheek and sealed it in an envelope with my sneakers. Then I put everything in a briefcase. That evening, Will left and Mel asked me, "What's going on with you, Ted? You seem tired." I had just passed a medical exam, but something didn't feel right. Will was probably nervous about the new doctor. "How is she?" Mel asked. "Good, pretty," I replied. I was nervous, you know. She has this contagious laugh. You haven't gotten up yet? Mel asked. No, I was too nervous about it, I said. Well, I'll see her next week and ask her to check on me. Yo, so I dipped out on her that night, 'cause she was trying to get it on, but I wasn't feeling it. Surprisingly, she was cool about it and didn't make a big deal. The next day, I took the DNA samples to the lab myself and shelled out some cash for a rush job. They said they'd have results by Friday. 2 days later, I was back at my gig as a lawyer at an investment bank. Basically, I oversee a team of 6 other lawyers and we're based in Washington near the regulators. Been in this game for 22 years and I make bank. Hey, I have some stock options that could make me some serious cash if I cashed them out. I'll admit, I was a bit distracted at work, but I still got everything done. I rode my bike to work and back, thinking the exercise would help calm me down. When I got home to 600 Mel, she wasn't there, just a note saying there were sandwiches and salad in the fridge. She was off to a play and maybe a bachelorette party. Usually, I wouldn't think twice about it since she does stuff like that all the time, but now I'm feeling a bit unsure. I checked out the location. So, she was on her phone, not at a club, but at a motel near the Fairfax line. I grabbed some food and chatted with Will about college. He was excited for it. Summer treated him well, he worked at a bike shop and made good money, but he was down because he and his girlfriend Lisa broke up. I hit the sack early. Mel showed up at 11 o'clock and crashed in bed right away. No shower, and she backed off when I tried to get close. I did it to test her, I knew she was cheating, just not with who. So, I woke up early and biked to work again. I showered and got straight to work. It was a busy morning and then around 1 o'clock, I got a call from the DNA lab. They emailed me the report, and the tech on the phone said that Will's samples matched my nephew. I was shocked, man. I only have one brother, Robert, who's 3 years older than me. He helped me out a lot when we were kids. We are both about 6 feet tall and average build. He's a good guy. This dude used to be a jock in school and played basketball in college. He wasn't a big shot, but he still played. After he graduated, he got into real estate and ended up starting his own company. He married his college sweetheart, Glenda Wilson, and they had 3 kids. All 3 of them went to college and now they are working. About 4 years ago, Melissa started working at his company, but before that, she was a teacher. He was making good money and she didn't even have to work, since their oldest kid was old enough to take care of himself after school. She wanted something more exciting, at least that's what she said. Now, I didn't believe anything she said after finding out about the DNA news. I sat there wondering what could have happened. All 3 of my kids had birthdays at the end of September. The countdown I got was around Christmas. When Mel and I decided to have kids, she stopped taking birth control pills. We tried for months before last Christmas, before Brad came along. During Christmas, there was a big family gathering, and Rob was there with his family. So, after Christmas that year, and for a few more years, Mel and her buddy Linda Green would dip out on a week-long meditation retreat. They would peace out on Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, and come back on New Year's Day. Sometimes they would even extend their stay for an extra week. The retreat was supposed to be in the mountains of West Virginia. When Brad showed up, Mel ditched, but I went back the next year. The time after that, Mary showed up in September, but there was no workshop because she was still breastfeeding. When she was 15 months old, Mel and Linda went on a trip and will arrive the following September. The traveling seminars went on for a few years. I remember when they stopped because Mel started working for Rob. Linda Green had been Mel's best friend since college. She got a job at Rob's new company when he opened it, so the 3 of them worked together for a while. The following weekend, we took Will back to college. I rented a minibus and we had a nice 2-hour drive on Saturday. We had lunch with Will and helped him move in. Mel and I said goodbye to Ted and Mike as they headed back to their apartment. Once we were alone, Mel noticed I was being quiet. She asked me why I hadn't said anything to her and looked worried. I told her I had a lot on my mind and didn't want to talk about it. Then she asked if Ted was being honest about his physical exam, but I told her to drop it. We talked for about an hour after that. I basically left her and went back to the van, then he went to a nearby bar and had some beers. I kept thinking about it and couldn't figure out how Mel got pregnant with Rob's kid. They must have been having sex for years. Maybe it was Rob she met at the motel bar. I was more pissed off than ever. You know how they say about seeing red. Everything just seemed off to me. I totally freaked out the bar manager, this young woman, and in the end, she just threw a 10 on the counter and bounced. I used to hang with a bunch of friends, playing cards and hitting the tennis court. My best bud was Ned Bart, but his missus and Mel never hit it off. Sty, his wife, was not feeling Mel at all. Their kids had all bounced off to college, so when I showed up at their place, Sty answered the door and Ned was close by. They could tell right away that I was in bad shape. Ned's got a little gym set up in his backyard garage, so I told him I needed to work out. We ended up practicing self-defense at a small gym nearby. I knew he had a punching bag because we worked together once a week. One day, we went out to the backyard and I put on gloves and started hitting his heavy bag like my life depended on it. Ned just watched silently as I went crazy on the bag. After a while, I started to calm down and hit it more strategically. I just kept going until I couldn't anymore and collapsed. Ned helped me up and walked me to his house where I collapsed on a lounge chair on his patio. His wife, Suddy, brought me some water and I started to regain my senses. I started crying and Ned asked if someone had died or gotten hurt. I replied, "Not yet, my friend." My kids started acting all grumpy, so these two smarties decided to give me some space. 10 minutes later, Ned showed up with the beer and Sadie plopped down next to me. She said, "Now that you've done all this, you gotta spill the beans." I made them promise to keep their traps shut and spilled everything. Both of them were shocked. Ned was like, "How did I not know? Your folks should have told me." I remembered the medical records from when I was a kid. It spelled out everything about my condition. They knew. Sadie asked, "So what's the plan?" I shrugged and said, "I have no clue. Don't ask me. Hey, make sure you take this seriously, don't lose it like you did with the bag. Prison is no joke. I'd better head home now, Mel will be freaking out and I don't want any drama." I drove back to my place and Mel was waiting at the door, asking where I've been. I stopped for a beer and ran into Ned, ended up helping him out with some work at his place. My bad for not calling. After that, I took a shower and we had dinner. On Sunday, we went for a picnic at the park and did some rollerblading, but we ran out of time. Hey, so on Sunday night Mel seemed upset and puzzled. She told me she woke up early and went to work without getting it on. I had a meeting with a lawyer at a nearby office, stopped by the bank, and swung by HR at work to switch up my retirement account details. It was a hassle, but the lawyer mentioned divorce laws in our state. Millie Stanton even hinted that my wife and brother might be messing around behind my back. Maybe this info will come in handy. I asked her to start the divorce process ASAP. Make sure she doesn't give it to Mel yet, I'll give the green light in the evening. I put tracking software on Mel's phone since she was on my plan, so I could see her messages and calls. I also planted 3 voice recorders in my house, one in the kitchen, bedroom, and living room, and one in her car. I got Mel to organize a party at my place with Rob and Glenda on Friday night. Monday and Tuesday, I stayed late at work, telling Mel I had some important stuff to deal with. Last Wednesday, I got home on time. We had a nice dinner, but despite me putting on a happy face, there was no action in the bedroom. Mel was obviously disappointed. Later, when Mel went to bed, I downloaded all the recordings and checked her phone. There weren't many calls or messages throughout the day. No one else was home, and Mel didn't even talk to herself. She only made 2 calls, one to Rob's cell phone and one to my mom. My mother had been widowed 5 years ago. She was 78 years old and lived just 30 minutes away from where I grew up. Just as I was starting to feel uneasy, the doorbell rang and that's when I heard it. "Hey Mom, have you heard anything about Tim lately? He seems to be losing it after his physical, he's not himself. Just checking in." Okay, next I called Rob. "Hey Rob, it's Mel. No, we can't meet up this week. You guys are coming on Friday and Tim is acting weird. I don't think he'll figure anything out. We're being cautious. I think he got some bad news from the physical. Okay, see you later." That was basically the gist of the convo. Even though my marriage is officially over, they are still together. It crossed my mind that they might have initially thought they were helping me out, but in truth, no matter what they believe, I'm going to make them pay as much as I can. Rob and Glenda showed up at 6:30 on Friday. Mel and I cooked up some burgers, fries, and salad. While we were doing that, I purposely ignored Mel. She noticed, but didn't say anything. When the doorbell rang, she looked at me and said, "I hope you're not going to be in a bad mood all night." I didn't say anything in response. Hey, so I walked in and Rob and Glenda were there. Glenda gave me a hug, but when Rob tried to do the same, I dodged it. I got them some drinks, a beer for Rob and white wine for Glenda. We all sat on the terrace and I dropped the bomb, "I'm filing for divorce on Monday, Mel. And Rob, I'm taking you to court for child support for all the years I took care of your kids." Mel started crying, Rob got up and started yelling at me, calling me names. Glenda just watched as Rob tried to hit me. I was just chilling on the porch when he started getting all up in my face. I backed away, turned in my chair, and that's when he got all aggressive, asking if I was mad and calling me a hypocrite. He tried to start a fight, but I dodged his punches and hit him in the stomach. He wasn't no match for me. I kept on hitting him until he fell on my shoulder, then I kneed him in the balls and tossed him onto the terrace. Glenda was there, witnessing the whole thing. I stood up and only glanced at Mel, who ran to Rob. He was awake and groaning. Mel looked at me and said, "You had no reason to hurt Rob. You're a savage, you could have killed him." She was still crying, and I replied, "I still can, and you're not safe either. You're sneaky." Mel turned pale at my threat and slowly backed away from Rob. I growled at her, "Pick up this piece of trash and get him out of my sight. You have 1 minute before I finish him off completely." Mel struggled to pick up Rob. "Man, he's such a burden," she said to Glenda. "Help me out with him." Glenda finally snapped out of it and just flat out refused. "No way, you guys are on your own." I could tell Mel agreed as she dragged Rob over to the couch on the patio and then carried him, stumbling, into the kitchen. I turned to Glenda, "So you had no idea?" "Nope, I've had my suspicions about Rob for a while, but not with Mel. I thought they were still going strong. Maybe she's hooking up with other guys, I don't know." As I heard the garage door opening, I headed inside. Mel put Rob in the front seat of her SUV and drove away. Glenda, a 46-year-old blonde woman who looked nice for the dinner party, came inside crying with smeared makeup. I offered her more wine but she refused. She was sitting at the kitchen table and said, "I did it." Glenda mentioned that Rob always went on ski trips during the winter, but she hated skiing and stayed home with Mark. Was like, "I wonder where they actually went, who gives a crap, this is all too much for me." Sorry Glenda, I thought you were in the loop. Are you really getting a divorce? Oh, I never doubted it, I told Glenda. I offered her to crash in the guest room overnight, and she was cool with it. Then we started reminiscing about the old days, speculating where Rob and Mel might hook up. I showed her the recording of Mel's call to Rob, and she made it clear that their little romance is still going strong. At 10 o'clock, we chowed down on some burgers and chatted a bit more about practical stuff. Stuff like where we gonna live. I had an apartment near work lined up with a waiting list. I thought me and Mel would share the money, including what we get from selling the house. I'm gonna stay here for now. Glenda went upstairs to hit the hay, so I went up to check on the guest room. She was all set. I grabbed her a towel and toothbrush. When he left, she told me she's always had a thing for me, not so much for Mel. She thought I was beneath her, but now I see why. I waved goodbye and closed the door. The next morning I was up and about, the cops never showed up. I figured Rob and Mel didn't want any drama. I asked Glenda what her plan was and she said she was gonna crash at her mom's until Rob bounced. I gave her my lawyer's email and told her to hit her up for advice. Her car was still parked, so I asked if she wanted me to roll with her to grab more stuff. She was down, so I grabbed my piece from the safe and followed her to their place. Mel's ride wasn't there, just Glenda and I went in and no one was there. I started thinking about how much I had hurt him. I hoped he was in some crappy hospital where he might catch a deadly infection and die of dehydration or something. Glenda sat down and said she was wondering where they were. She decided to check the phone locator again. I couldn't understand why Mel didn't see this before. This time, her phone was at Cambria Hospital. I called the hospital to ask if Rob was there. He told me he had arrived, so I told Glenda. She decided to stay home and change the locks, so I went to Home Depot and bought a bunch of new hardware, some for her, some for me. Spent the morning installing it all. Gave her the keys and left, but I felt bad and said I wanted to come back. She agreed and said she would cook. Finished changing the locks on my house and made extra keys for both of us. Returned home to her at 4 o'clock, and when I walked in, they called me on my cell phone. Detective William James wanted to chat with me. I told him I'm over at 2004 Weston Street. Mrs. Glenda Miller is here too. She's the second witness, not the victim's wife. He wasn't actually a victim, detective. Yep, that's her. You coming? I can be there in 15 minutes. He was a black guy with light skin, short and stocky. He was dressed sharp in a fancy suit and pricey moccasins. Glenda let him in through the front door and he introduced himself. Then he asked if we were comfortable. She replied, "No, it's our spouses who don't play us, play fair." She glanced at me and said calmly, like it was no big deal. James stared at her, then at me, and said, "Maybe you'll catch a break, kid." I replied with, "Maybe." I glanced over at Glenda, but she didn't look away. I didn't think this was the best way to handle a police interrogation. James said he wanted to talk to Mrs. Miller first. Glenda took him out to the back patio and I saw him start recording on his phone. They talked for about 20 minutes. Then Glenda came back inside and signaled for me to come. So, I was chilling on the patio when she walked by and whispered in my ear. She was basically throwing out an offer that seemed too good to be true. I've always had a thing for her and thought she was hot, but I'm not really into playing games or pulling pranks. Then this detective dude pops up out of nowhere and starts questioning me, saying he's recording everything. He wanted to know all the deets about what went down. I started by realizing that my own kids were the ones who stole stuff, and I only found out recently. I spilled about how we had dinner on Friday and how they reacted, and I also told him about our argument. I tried to be as honest and precise as possible. When I finished, he was like, "How did you know all this?" And I was just like, "I don't know, man. Hey, I need to talk about this." Long story short, no one ratted me out, everything just happened randomly. "Okay, Mr. Miller, your story lines up with what the wives said." "I haven't talked to your brother yet, why?" "Because when I spoke to your wife, it seemed like he was the one who started it all. And you fought back, and now he's not doing too well. He needs to stay and get checked out for a day or so." I asked for tests, and he stared at me intensely. "This is serious. A hit to the balls is the only thing that can mess you up like that. Man, that guy was causing trouble, but then he just walked away and flashed a smile. Wonder what's gonna go down now. I'm gonna jot this down and shoot it over to the DA to make a call. I'll also chat with your bro." Detective James got up, and I followed him into the house where Glenda met up with us. As we headed towards the front door, he glanced back at us before saying, "Hope you two have a good night," and headed to his car. Glenda shut the door behind him, then turned to me with a smirk and suggested we grab some dinner, a big ol' salad, maybe. She told me to grab something from the fridge, no need to rush. Her tone made it clear what she wanted from me. I don't know how women do it, but I kissed her back. It was clear she wanted me, so I had no reason to say no. We got lost in our kisses and ended up on the sofa. She pulled me close, she was eager, and I reciprocated. After getting undressed, I stood over her as she took off her dress. Later, I realized she had planned it all and dressed to seduce me. And it definitely worked. It wasn't just sex, it was more than that. Man, it was just pure lust. I made her climax multiple times, then I couldn't hold back any longer and reached the finish line. I rolled off of her and she slowly got up, took my hand, and led me to the kitchen. We had dinner, then went upstairs. She said she knew what we were doing was kind of like making things right, but she didn't mind. I didn't either. We had sex, then shower sex, and switched positions to please each other, climaxing more than once. Eventually, our bodies started craving sleep, and we finally got some. I woke up first, still feeling satisfied. So, I was in the master bedroom shower when she walked in on me. This led to another fight, but we ended up soaking each other, washing everything, and wiping it dry. Then we brought each other to the finish line again. After that, we took another shower and had breakfast. It was Sunday and we both wondered what was going on with our spouses, but neither of us were church people. I checked the location of Mel's phone and she was at my mother's house. It just reminded me that I should talk to my mother, who probably played some role in my cuckolding. So, I talked to Glenda. So she was like, I don't really know what's going on with all this, you know. Maybe it's not important, but it is to me if my mom is involved. I also need to chat with Mel, maybe she tried to come home but couldn't get in, and she didn't even try to reach out to me. They are probably working things out. I'm going over there, you wanna come with? I always want to. I'm down, you snatched my hat off. She laughed. So are you down to go see Mom with me? Yeah, why not? We can show them what we've been up to. What's the point of getting back at someone with sex if they don't even know about it? We both laughed as we pulled up to my mom Shirley Miller's house. Mel's car was parked outside. Glenda and I stepped out onto the porch and my mom opened the door. Go away, Tim, you hurt Rob. Well, Rob deserved it anyways, he tried to hit me. I'm here to figure out how deep you're in this mess. If I walk out now, I'm never coming back. She let me in and Glenda followed. Mel was in the kitchen, she saw me and Glenda and we both knew what was up. Man, she was like, oh, you didn't wait long, huh? And I was like, nah, why should I wait? She said your boyfriend can't please me anymore, but your husband definitely can. Mel got up quickly, but I pulled her away. My mum yelled at us to stop, and then she looked at me and said, Tim, you probably messed everything up when you went with Glenda. I was like, nah, now I'm a free agent, and so is she. I think it's always been like that for Mel and Rob, and Glenda, and I have a lot of catching up to do. We are off to a good start. Mel said, you better listen to me. So, your mum spilled the beans and maybe we can fix things. Tim was all confused, looking between his wife and mom. I'm all ears, he said. Shirley glanced at Mel, who said, we wanted kids, just you and me. But when we started trying, your mum dropped a bomb, saying you were infertile, no kids. What? I had a plan, Shirley said. Rob could have knocked up Mel and you would have been clueless. Wait, you decided all this without filling me in. Tim shot back. Your dad wanted to talk about it, but got interrupted. So, 3 of us voted to reject, 2 were for it, and you were against it just like your dad. We explored different medical options, but they were all too pricey and time-consuming. And you should have known that you were basically raising Rob's kids, Mel pointed out. So, we eventually agreed to do things the natural way, I chimed in. But you went behind our backs and hooked up for a week, no, 2 weeks straight. Must have been a blast, Mel. She glanced down and admitted, once we got past the initial hesitation, I had a really good time. Can't deny that. Everything was fine, I told you it was fine 3 times and you were excited to spend time with Rob. Mel said yes, I was waiting for him, he's a good guy. Glenda asked, is it true, what about me, but he lied and made fun of me. Shirley said we agreed that you might disagree. Glenda frowned, you were totally right, I didn't agree then and I still don't agree now. You were the reason for my divorce, at least in part. I bet Tim feels the same. Mel said, nobody needs to get a divorce, neither of you knew anything and up until now, you were both happy. What's happened, Ed, my medical? So, at the doctor's office, I found out I've been infertile since birth. I got a DNA test done with William. Mel looked away and said, now you know everything, Tim. We can get through this. You love those kids, don't you? Do you love me? I replied, but, Mel, you kept cheating on us even after we had 3 kids. You only stopped when you started working at his company. And I bet you never really stopped. Glenda snapped, well, how many times have you and Rob had sex in the past year? Shirley glared at Mel and said, please, tell me it's not true. We fell in love and were compatible. So, we got up and kept meeting. I was like, yeah, just like last week at the Shady Pines Motel. Mel looked surprised and asked, did you hire a detective? I just activated the location tracker on your phone, Mel said. We can stop if you want. I only need you, Tim, Glenda said. I want him too, Glenda added. You can go be with your new love interest. There's no turning back. Shirley, who was standing, suddenly sat down on the kitchen chair. She didn't look well. I asked, Mom, are you okay? She started crying. What have I done, my God, Glenda said. It's just secrets and lies. More secrets and lies would have been avoided if you just told Tim the truth from the start, Mel said. Then none of our kids would even exist, so maybe what Shirley did wasn't that bad. I glanced at Mel. You're not getting it, Mel. You, Rob, and my mom all conspired against me. Looking back, my whole life seems like a fake front. You stole my life from me. Everything has been a lie. I sat down, overcome with sadness. Mel came closer, but I pushed her away. I cried, never again, Mel. Never again. Glenda hugged me from behind. We all felt the weight of the situation. I finally broke down and got up, and Glenda and I just walked away from the rest of the group. No one even bothered to follow us. When we got back to a place, we were both feeling off. I pitched in to help her with weeding the garden and mowing the lawn. We grabbed some lunch, and then the conversation turned serious. I asked Glenda if she was really sure about going through with the divorce, considering she and Rob were so tight. Glenda responded, remember when you said they were sucking the life out of you? I feel the same way. I'm gonna see your lawyer tomorrow and we can go together. But I don't see any way to salvage this. It's been too long and too ugly. That's what I told her. This is what I believe in. I have to think about the kids, maybe if there's a divorce they should know why. How should I break it to them? Should I call them or write a letter and ask them to call? So I did. After lunch, I wrote a letter to my 3 kids. The main point of the letter, after I laid out the facts, was that they will always be my children. They will always be the ones I raised and loved. I sent an email and asked them all to call. My cell phone rang a little over an hour later. It was my daughter Mary. She asked, Dad, are you? Hey Will, how's it going? It's really tough dealing with this. I just want you to know that I love you and you'll always be my dad. I'm struggling to figure out what to do with my mom and grandma. Grandma thought she was helping me, but I never expected them to team up against you. I'll never forgive her, no way. What you decide to do is up to you. I'll need some time to figure things out. Hopefully, we can find a way to sort things out somewhat amicably. It won't be easy, but I'm hopeful. So, I just needed to chat with you. I love you. And you know what? I love you too. We ended the call and then Brad called, 2 minutes later, and we had, the same kind of conversation. William called at 11, after reading the letter. He was a bit more reserved than the other 2. He mentioned something about Mom when I was at home and everyone else was at school. I kinda ignored it, but I needed to talk to someone about it. Sorry, Dad. There's no need to be down, everything's all good now. You were in a tough spot and didn't know all the details. We wrapped up our chat. Hey, so after a bit he wasn't talking much. He was really close to his mom, or at least that's what it seemed like. I was curious about how well he really knew her and Rob. Glenda was in the kitchen, going through this old photo album. I joined her, and there were all these pictures of her family and mine growing up. After a bit, we were both tearing up. She said maybe it's not a good idea to keep looking, but I told her we gotta face what's been lost. I gave her a hug and a friendly kiss, and we went through the memories again. Then we headed up to bed and ended up sleeping together. So on Monday morning there was no hanky-panky. We went to talk to this lawyer, Millie Stanton. She didn't want to chat with both of us at the same time, but we were nah, we're a package deal. She was this big lady in her 50s with some old school hairdo and grey hair, but she was chill. I actually kinda liked her, despite her hairstyle. She broke down the whole divorce process in our state and mentioned how adultery used to be a legit reason for divorce, but not so much anymore. Our situation was apparently pretty unique, so she helped us come up with a plan where we'd each file for divorce separately. I was gonna sue Rob for spousal support, but Millie didn't want Glenda around because Rob's money was mixed with hers. Millie said she'd deal with it or he could wait until after her maternity leave to take legal action. I made sure Mel got served at work with Rob on Wednesday. I took Glenda to a bank to split their stuff, which took forever, and then we grabbed a late lunch at Burson's Italian joint. We got back to her place after that. So I was like, let's go back to my place, and she was totally down. We didn't even care about the new locks, we just went in. She was checking out all the stuff that she used to know from back in the day. Then she turned to me with this look and was like, I need you on my bed right now. I couldn't say no to that, so I scooped her up and took her upstairs to the big bed in the main bedroom. She was cracking up and said, "You're so rough and strong, there's no way Rob could do that." So she got up and stripped down, just like me, and we both ended up naked on the bed. Then, things started off slow. It was weird for me to be having sex with another woman in that bed, but I quickly got over it. She was just wild and did what she wanted. In the end, she had such a powerful orgasm that she passed out, and I almost fainted too when I reached my peak. After that, we laid there for a while, and she said it was amazing to take another woman's husband on her own bed. I just smiled and said, how petty. Girl, you were all about it and everything was going your way, well mostly mine, but you were into it too, obviously. I was feeling it too. We hit a peak with that revenge sex. Then she started laughing and it all went downhill from there. But it wasn't like we were done. We kept going all night until we had to stop in the morning before work. I showed her some tender love after we showered and she started crying, so did I. But we got dressed and headed to work. Glenda ended up taking one of Mel's work outfits, probably out of revenge. It was a bit snug on top. Mel even called me at work later. Hey, I gotta go grab my stuff from the house. I showed up to work in a dirty outfit. I can meet you at the house at 6. Has Rob gotten out of the hospital yet? Nah, he's still gotta have surgery. Bummer. Were you staying at now, still crashing at your mom's place? Nah, I'm in your old room. Funny how that worked out. Were you and that other person staying now, hopping from place to place? You guys should probably rent out one of the houses. What's gonna happen when Rob gets out? Not my problem. Have you heard anything about the kids? Nah, nothing yet. What have you done about it? I sent them an email with a report of what went down and chatted with them on the phone. Man, Tim, they are gonna hate me. None of them called me. You know you deserve it, she yelled. I blacked out. I met Mel at the house at 6 and she actually showed up on time, which was amazing. She got out of the car and I unlocked the door. She went upstairs and then I heard her scream. You had her on my bed, man, I could smell it. I can't believe you did this. I went up and told her she wanted revenge for taking her husband away. In my opinion, that's not enough. Mel's anger was pouring out of her. She gathered her clothes and I helped her carry them downstairs. She was packing her toiletry bag and didn't even realize Glenda's clothes were gone. She turned to me and asked, any chance we can fix this? I told her straight up, nah, it's done, Mel. It's over between us. She looked sad, but not shocked. She said, I really wanted a happy family at first, like any wife. Thought this was the answer. But then it all went to shit. I'm sorry, but I can't forgive you. There's no way you can make up for what you did. Kids with some other dude and been cheating on me for years. Saying sorry ain't gonna cut it and I don't buy your apology. She hopped in the car and drove off, then got served at work the next day. Glenda was with Rob at the hospital after lunch. My mom called and was like, Tim, did you really have to rush with those papers? I was like, no way, Mom, she's been hooking up with Rob all this time. No need for Tim, Mom, and don't forget who you're talking to. Man, it all started last week. Everything was cool until then. I told her I was done, but I still don't know what to do about it. She's the one who started this mess. Gotta keep away from those fake friends. Rob got out of the hospital on Friday, but he couldn't go home cause Glenda would have shot him with his own gun. Ended up crashing at our mom's place and Mel was there too. I didn't give a damn if they were hooking up, even in my old room or his. But if Mom's cool with it, then whatever. I'm done with her. We talked about it with Glenda and we decided to find out the truth. I still had the key to her house, so we waited until 2 o'clock in the morning. I drove us there and used the key to sneak in through the back door. I brought a gun just in case. Glenda stayed downstairs while I went upstairs and peeked into my old room. I knew they would be in the room with the double bed. She wasn't in Rob's room, they were both in there. I had my phone ready and turned on the light to take some pictures. There were screams, mostly from her. Mel was butt naked and Rob had a big bandage around his ribs, he couldn't move right. Mel just covered herself with a blanket. My mom ran down the hall and saw me. She said, "Tim, don't jump to conclusions." I told her I don't need her approval for what they did, or still do. I walked away and went downstairs. Glenda was waiting for me there. She said, "I guess they were hooking up, huh?" I was like, "Yeah, go Mom." Mom and Mel came running. Mel had on a robe and bad boy Rob was nowhere to be found. Mom said, "They are adults, what can I do? Kick them out onto the street, this used to be my bed." "I reckon Rob's aim is to get to her no matter where I was," Mel responded. "He didn't want me, couldn't you hear him?" I laughed at her, "Even though you probably gave it a shot, huh? And what, I don't stand a chance with you, is that true? I hope you both go to hell." I turned to my mom, "I'm done with you. I'm still your son, but not anymore. Now you have him, not me." Glenda and I left. We went back to her place. We hit the sack at 4 o'clock. Glenda and I stuck together while the divorces were going on. So Mel and I went to court and sold the house, then split the money. She didn't get any alimony or anything else from me because the judge wasn't a fan of what she did. My kids have gotten used to things now. The older two don't really talk to Mel, except for sending a Christmas card. They've blocked her calls. Will talk to her, but wasn't very nice about it. When it was time for him to spend the summer, he stayed with me and didn't see Rob. Mel met up with him for lunch a few times, but Will didn't want to talk to him. Glenda got almost nothing. Why, I know, she got to keep the house and got a big chunk of cash from Rob's business. Rob was living in a 2-bedroom apartment close to his job with Mel, but about a week after the divorce, Glenda and I talked. Our physical attraction was still strong, but besides that, we just didn't really click. That's why I decided to move out. Neither of us were all that bummed about it. I think we both knew from the start that our relationship wasn't gonna last. There was just too much history between us. She did make me promise to come over and hook up though. I used to hook up with her every now and then, as long as she wasn't seeing someone else or I wasn't either. We both agreed she was hot and we had great chemistry. I had a surgery that fixed my fertility issue when I was 49, so now I can have kids. There's a lot of positives in that, I think. One night at the gym where me and Ned go to practice self-defense, I saw this woman kicking a heavy bag like a total badass. She looked amazing. After she finished, she looked back at me and asked if I was scared. I just smiled and backed off, raising his. Putting up her hands in surrender, she laughed. "I was watching you. You're not afraid of me," she said. I replied, "Not afraid at all." "I'm Hilda Marks and you're Tim Miller," she said. "I'm gonna go take a shower and grab some coffee." She gestured towards the store across the street. I told her, "Meet me there in 10 minutes. She counted, "Make it 15, I'm a woman after all." Without a doubt, we had a nice chat. She was new in town, 36 years old, with a son in school and no husband. She left him on the West Coast. We spent almost 2 hours talking, and by the time the store closed, she knew. She was all up in my medical history and stuff, and I was totally into it. At the time, I had this bungalow about a mile away from the gym, with 2 bedrooms. It took her 2 weeks before she finally came over to my place and stayed the night. Let me tell you, she was just as wild in bed as she was at the gym, but I was stronger and she wasn't trying to win, I wanted to be conquered. It was a real turn-on for me, man. Her son, Donald, was 16 at the time and in the second to last year of high school. We hit it off pretty well because we both played baseball. I ended up helping him out with some stuff. Me and Hilda tied the knot 6 months after we started dating. She got pregnant, kinda by accident, and we moved into the house I bought next to my old one. We made sure the kid had his own room and set up a spot in the basement for sports gear so Hilda could keep being active. Soon enough, Thomas Timothy Miller came into the world and he was like a miracle to me. Mel and Rob were in the past. Hilda switched jobs and I started dating a plumber who was 40 years younger than her. But hey, she's still attractive. Glenda also got hitched to some guy. She was with James Wilder back in college. Hilda and I chatted with them a bit and he seemed like a decent guy. I can attest that Glenda still looks great. She's probably still a babe in the bedroom. James and I had a heart-to-heart about it one day. It was a bonding moment. I never really forgave my mom, but he visited her when Thomas was born and she was over the moon. Hilda made sure his mom saw the baby regularly. She was more understanding towards her than I was. My mom passed away in June this year. The memorial service was peaceful despite our differences. Rob just left, saying he's not family. He's been avoiding me. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so your partner doesn't play you. And stay tuned for the next story. It's gonna blow your mind more than this one.